until you explore, you don't really realize how much there is. Physician assistant, for example, is
Yep.
a very popular profession, but 15 years ago, people didn't really know much about that, as
Right.
well as even getting a master's in public health, or even going into pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical sales or
Mhm.
medical device equipment. Say you had a student really interested in physics, but also was interested in biology and medicine. So there are so many things out there that are beyond, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse practitioner.
Welcome to the Health Science Coach Podcast. My name is Drew Garner, and I'm a health science and physical education teacher. This is a podcast to help students, parents, and recent graduates learn about pathways into healthcare and sports medicine careers. These industry professionals lay out how their experiences have helped them get to where they are now. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel or download through your podcast player. Thanks again for spending some time with us today. Now let's dig in. Today we get the pleasure of meeting Dr. Reed. He is a professor of health science at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and the founder of Walkabout. Dr. Reed, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to hear about Walkabout and Furman and what you do in the health science department. Can you give us a little detail about your career and what you do as a professor of health science at the college level?
Sure, absolutely. So I was a former PE teacher decades ago,
Okay.
and then went into sports medicine, became a certified athletic trainer, so an ATC. And as I was going through graduate school, and I went this was even during my master's, I got really interested in physical activity and beyond just injury prevention, but overall physical activity and fitness, um, and how social and built environments impact physical activity. And so I kind of moved in that direction. I initially thought I was going to wanted to be a curriculum director to certify athletic trainers in college. And as I was doing that type of work, realized, athletic trainers work extraordinarily hard and they are never at home. And even if you were working at the curriculum level at the higher ed, it is still, you're in the classroom, you're out in the field, and it's a lot. But I was more interested in, kind of behavior of physical activity. Why do people engage in activity more often? Why do people not engage in activity?
Okay.
And so I started really doing a lot of that during my doctoral work. And as I graduated and got a job here at Furman, where I was training pre-service physical educators, I still was really interested in how to get kids, as well as adults, but I really was focusing on kids, how to get them moving more. Because when I really graduated with my doctorate, it was in 2002. And although the child obesity epidemic was already identified, it was really in its infancy, if you will, to where it is now. And my wife's a classroom teacher. So a
Yep.
big part was, okay, how do I get kids moving in school? And to do that, I realized, well, as a former PE teacher, teachers are asked to do a lot of different things. So asking them to do one more thing isn't really going to resonate. But what if you can teach what you're already teaching with math, language arts, social studies? And what if you could do that with movement, and then the movements that the kids do tell the teacher if they're getting the concepts or not? So that's really where, Walkabouts came in. I used to teach a course at the university for pre-service classroom teachers. So I was training the classroom teacher, because the classroom teacher, like it or not, sees the kids, especially in elementary school, way more than any extracurricular. So this was something I was really interested in. About halfway through my time here at Furman, I already had my doctorate. I decided to go get a master's in public health. And fortunately, just an hour and a half south of here, the University of South Carolina has some of the most premier, eminent folks in physical activity research and physical activity promotion. So I did that, and ultimately trying to figure out better ways that we can provide our youth as well as adults to be moving, whether it's changing our environments, our physical environments, or teaching a little bit differently to allow those kids who need to move as they learn. And let me just shut off my email so you don't hear that. So that's kind of the history, a little bit of Walkabouts and me. I teach a variety of course at the university. I teach an intro to wellness course. I teach a graduate level course, and not graduate level, sorry, undergraduate level course, but 300 level in health policy for our public health majors. I also teach motor development and motor learning. So I see a lot of students interested in PT and OT.
Right.
So kind of a generalist in that sense.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So as you kind of were talking there, you said you have a background as a PE teacher, as an athletic trainer, and now as a professor in college. Let's kind of go backwards in time and look at when you went to undergrad. You went to Hobart and William Smith College. How did you kind of choose that specific school, and what kind of led you wanting in to become a PE teacher to start out
Yeah.
your career?
Well, I really didn't necessarily want. I thought I was going to be a physical therapist, and then
Yeah.
I volunteered at a geriatric ward, and I wasn't that engaged in that activity. So I thought, I don't know if this is something I really want to do. What got me to Hobart, to keep it really, really short, it's a small liberal arts college, and I played soccer and baseball, and I wanted to continue to play soccer and baseball at the Division III level. So that really led me there. And then as I was there, thinking I was going to go into PT, I was taking most of the prerequisites for PT. Small liberal arts colleges don't typically have PT programs. So it was during that time. Excuse me, let me get a little bit
Yeah.
of water here. So I thought I was going to do that, and then I decided after I graduated, you know what, I'm much more interested of athlete sports medicine.
Yeah.
And then I did the master's there, and then I was really getting interested in. I didn't really work in physical education until actually later during my graduate work, as more of a way to get kids moving more. Not necessarily I was seeking out to become, that licensed PE teacher, but I was doing a lot of that physical education pedagogy or sport pedagogy, if you will,
Mhm.
during my doctoral work as a way of saying, okay, we talk about literacy all the time, but what about physical literacy? I was actually using that term physical literacy a long, long time ago. And I, by no means did I coin it, but it's become much more in vogue these days. So that's a little bit about how I got to Hobart.
Okay.
And always being in sports and movement, I've always been a mover, so that's probably why I continue on with what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And then you went to University of Miami and got your master's in exercise and sports science. Is that the pre-PT type stuff, or how did that?
Well, that was where I decided I don't think I want to go to PT. I think I want to go more kind of like sports medicine, working with athletes, athletic training. And a big part of that was, as I mentioned, my senior year in undergraduate, I did that internship, and I was like, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. And then I decided I want to be with more active individuals, but maybe not going to PT school. And so University of Miami had a program in sports medicine, and then I eventually, became an athletic trainer. The NATA, the National Athletic Training Association, used to have an internship route where you could get a certain amount of hours and then take the courses. As long as you had an undergraduate degree, you could sit for the exam. They did away with that about, I think, 20 years ago or so. And now if you want to go into sports medicine, athletic training, and I advise students here at the university, you have to go get an entry level master's in that. So it was during that time that I also, I had a great mentor professor, and I looked at what he was teaching. I really fell in love with anatomy as well. And I was like, I think I might want to become a professor. And he's like, well, you got to go after you're done with this degree, you got a little bit more. And so continued on, but still movement, activity was still a big part of what I was interested in.
Yeah. So with that that doctorate of kinesiology and exercise science, the master's in public health, and the master's in exercise and sports science, you're kind of able to get a whole general overview of, movement, health, wellness, teaching, the general public health, as well as now looking at, the general movement of trying to get kids that physical literacy, and, starting the development, like you mentioned earlier, that childhood obesity epidemic. What kind of wanted you to just stay in that realm, like as a professor in college, to really talk about, your passion for teaching that to other students?
Well, I think a big part of it is going into schools and seeing a child who you can just tell is unhealthy, and knowing that they can't control what they're fed at home or at school. Even they can't control how much activity they have, before school. Even during school, you only get very limited, whether it's recess or one day a week of PE, or even after school. There are a lot of kids, people think every kid gets access to after school sports. That's actually not true. I mean, sports become way more expensive. My state, South Carolina, ranks one of the lowest in children participating in after school physical activity. So I think I looked at it and was like, what can we do to intervene early? And ultimately, I look at physical activity as an intervention in the sense of, hey, we now know, it's pretty widely accepted, and we've known this for a long time, but you're hearing more and more administrators understanding, hey, if you move more, you're healthier. If you're healthier, you tend to do better in school. You improve your behavior management. But this didn't even start with kids, and this is where we lose sight of this is based, a lot of the movement that I talk about that improves cognition is based on the executive function hypothesis, right? The prefrontal cortex, which houses those executive functions, which they've been studying for quite some time, that the most aerobically fit adults, as well as now kids, tend to do better in cognitive skills. Well, we knew that from the field of gerontology in the 60s. It just took a long time to make its way to schools, because it's not that administrators and teachers didn't think kids should be moving and be healthy, but the links between the activity and the cognition were not necessarily well understood or identified. And now, with so many different researchers out there, and I do some of that research myself, we feel confident. Obviously, we're not saying this leads to that. We're not trying to infer that there's this causal relationship, because there are a lot of other variables, but the data tends to demonstrate that the most active children, the most aerobically fit, and we're now seeing muscular strength, muscular endurance, tend to perform better in academic achievement and academic performance. Well, it makes sense to look at the executive functions when you look at, well, what do executive functions do? They deal with working memory, right? They deal with planning, they deal with organizing, consequence evaluation when it comes to behavior management. If you do well in those things, a lot of those things translate over, that can improve your academic engagement.
Right. One thing that I've heard before is that, if a kid studies it or has issues learning, let's say English, or just is poor in English class, I've heard that having physical activity or PE before that class helps increase their scores in almost all their classes that they have after PE. Can you explain?
So that's been some of that, actually. A lot of that came out of a book by Dr. John Rady at Harvard. He wrote a best-selling book in 2008 called Spark, and he went and visited a school, and I think one of the ones you're referring to is a school in Naperville, Illinois, and they had a class, what they would call, learning readiness PE, or 0 hour, like before the day started. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because where does blood go after the heart? It goes up to the brain, and it goes to the rest of your organs.
Yeah.
And they found that those kids who participate in that did better academically. and why we shouldn't be shocked, right? Because if we know activity and more blood helps to then stimulate the brain, and we now know that stimulation leads to a variety of different structural changes in the brain because you bring these growth factors to the brain, which leads to an increase in neurons and structural changes with brain-derived neurotrophic factor (BDNF) in the hippocampus, that would lead to enhanced cognition. But this has been happening, this sort of thing. If you look at, I remember reading an article about 20 years ago about what they do in Japan and even factories. They start their day working, maybe even building a car, but they start their day moving, right? Because they're getting their body alert, right? And Dr. Grady, who you mentioned with that learning readiness, he's got a great TED talk. It's 10 minutes. And he starts it with doing some movement. He calls them these Hindu squats. And then he says, well, now you're ready to learn. You got to be alert to be able to take in that information. So yeah, there's data to support that. There's data to support too, that even after one bout of physical activity or exercise, you can improve your cognition. And walkabouts, we have evidence from two research institutions, Iowa State University and University of California, Irvine, that found just that when you engage with the content, when it's over, you're still engaged longer than the kids who didn't get the walkabout.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to go into next. So for the last 20 years, you've been a professor of health science at Furman, and you do some research examining the links between physical activity and cognition of the youth and physical activity in the built environment. And that kind of led you to develop walkabouts, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I work with a charter school here in Greenville. It's the only K-8, and that's high school too. But K-8, they require every kid gets 45 minutes of PE each day. So it's 45 minutes a day, and so that working with that school actually coincided when my first book came out, which was called Active Education, and it was about teaching with math, social studies, language arts, and science. And so this school started, and they were looking for someone who might be able to help get these kids moving more. And they reached out to my department chair, and he said, well, I've got a faculty member who actually does this. So it was really back in 2002, 2003, before I even started working at this charter school, that I started, writing paper lessons to get more movement in school for kids. And as I mentioned, my wife's a classroom teacher, knowing to get into the schools and ask them to do more activity wasn't going to work. So it was, okay, what if I taught you long and short vowel sounds, and I have the kids reach up for a long vowel sound, squat down low for a short vowel sound when it's showing on the Promethean board.
Wow.
And so I had some static paper lessons, and then teachers seemed to really respond to that. And so I wrote more. And then as I was going into different schools and training teachers throughout the country, early 2000s, you started to see a lot more technology come into the classroom. And so I saw that was an opportunity to leverage beyond just my paper to pencil lessons, a new technology that is scalable, not just with one teacher, but you could have thousands of teachers using these walkabouts. And the walkabouts are, engaging for elementary age kids. They're designed, you have an avatar. So we have a girl named Gia, a boy named Jax, and they take the kids on a 7 to 10 minute adventure, which we're using movement to teach the things that the teacher already has to teach. So we're not asking the teacher to do something else, no loss of instruction time. I'm sure your principal at your school would say, hey, Drew, what are you doing here? That's taken away from instruction time. But if you can blend them together, it's really a win-win, especially elementary kids like to move. So why wouldn't you use that, right, to your advantage?
Yeah. So some of the bullet notes I got written down about walkabouts, it helps support social and emotional learning with movement-based learning activities. How are you, like you were talking about the long vowel and short vowel sound, how are you able to implement that with social and emotional?
Well, what the other thing that we know about movement is it's really helps with mental health and improves self-esteem. And so that physical activity helps to provide that additional self-efficacy, that self-confidence that they're getting these concepts and they're using their body, which is something that they haven't traditionally done when they've been learning new content. And we know that movement helps to promote that improved health from the mental side. We learned a lot during COVID when kids were away from that interaction, that their social emotional health was really depressed, right? It went way down, and it moving and doing that in a classroom environment really helps to promote that.
And then it also talk about improving behavior management. I'm guessing that, by having them have their own space and moving around in the classroom, and by doing that kind of activity, they're able to kind of self-monitor their movements throughout the
They,
class.
yeah, they can self-monitor, and also going to back to the executive function. When you move, more and more blood goes to that prefrontal cortex. That also stimulates a part of the brain that helps you focus. So some of the research on walkabouts showed not only did it improve kids' academic performance, it decreased hyperactivity. Although it's counterintuitive, but the best way to treat kids who are hyper is not actually having them sit, is actually having them move. And sometimes maybe that movement's in a structured environment, such as, in a classroom, but that movement stimulates a part of that prefrontal cortex that then helps them focus. So the worst thing you can do to a kid who's really hyper and fidgety is to say, go sit down.
Yep, I'm picturing a few kids that I know that could definitely benefit from some of that. So some of the lessons you have included language arts, math, SEL, science, social studies, and those are all developed, like you were talking, for those earlier elementary ed type level classes. How did you kind of pick and choose, or develop first, I guess, which studies you were going to focus on?
Well, we early on, and my wife being a classroom teacher and being in elementary schools more so than other grades, movement lends itself really well to that content. Doesn't mean you can't do it in middle or high school. Actually, Columbia University in New York City, an Ivy League school, as I read a paper years ago, they were using movement to teach physics and different wave theory. So it can be done in any context. But we also know the earlier you get to children, the more likely you are going to have an impact based on brain development, right? The sensitive learning period, ages 3 to 8. We're focusing on pre-K through second and third grade, and we have some fourth and fifth grade content too. And so it really said, okay, the movement early on really leads to a lot of those structural changes in the brain. Doesn't mean those you don't have plasticity throughout your adulthood, but your brain is really plastic early on. So why not take advantage of that development period to get them moving as they learn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that really makes a lot of sense with that age group and that formation of, and continuing the development. If they start off young doing it, they're going to continue to.
Yeah, and that's that ingrained pattern. I often tell my students, we're talking about behavior. Most of you brush your teeth in the morning, and they say, yeah. And I'm like, well, did you see your parents brushing their teeth and that suddenly made you want to brush your teeth? Well, maybe, but they also showed you how to do it, and you did it early on, and it was an expectation of a pattern that you don't really remember when you started to learn to brush your teeth. You just like, well, I've always brushed my teeth. It's kind of that thing that we need to do more of when we're talking about positive behaviors related to health with physical activity. Well, I've always done this, right? My family was always active. Well, I've always washed my hands before dinner. I mean, there's things you do and you want them just be ingrained and part of who you are. We've engineered physical activity out of our lives in many ways through productivity, great technological advancements. That's great. In the early 1900s, people were dying from infectious disease. Now we're dying from chronic disease. We live a lot longer. However, we still need to move. We were designed to move, and sitting all day is not good for not only your physical health, but your emotional health as well.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that going from, teaching swimming 3 hours a day to PE and health and having a little mixture of everything to one semester I taught 6 hours of health and was in the same room doing the same lesson for 6 hours. And you definitely feel a big difference of, just that mental awareness of, not moving and not being as active and changing places around. So then with teachers, I guess, what does the ideal or perfect classroom / teacher district kind of look at if they wanted to incorporate walkabouts into their school or their lesson plans?
Great question. So really, we designed it where there was nothing required outside what is already in a classroom. You're doing movement that doesn't require any equipment. You're doing movement that you can do in your self space. All schools, virtually all schools, have internet now. So the only thing a school or a district would need is the internet. Our lessons, as you log in, you can see all the lessons that you can teach by academic standard. So if you're fitting this in with your lesson plan, all you have to do is say, oh, what am I teaching today? You can put that in a search, or you could just scroll down. And so you're able to see, oh, they have a great lesson for base 10. I'm going to be teaching that. What also is really cool about our platform is our system knows what state you're in. So it pulls in your state standards for math and language arts, social studies, and science. So South Carolina, that long and short vowel sound one I was sharing with you, I would get South Carolina standards to show I'm not only teaching this, but this lesson correlates with all this. While as if you have somebody in New York, you have somebody in Kansas City, it's going to be totally different standards for that particular state. So there's really nothing a school needs or a district needs outside of having access to internet, and they can get up and get a subscription, and literally it takes 4 clicks. You pick your grade, you pick your subject, you pick your subcategory, and then you pick what you want to teach. And then our system saves and date stamps everything for you once you play it. So then if you want to go back, oh, what did I play? That's 1 click. And then furthermore, although it plays like a video, it changes every time you play it. And that's the real uniqueness. So that long and short vowel sound one I just showed you, if you go and play that same one 30 seconds later, you'd get different words. If you were doing math, you'd get different numbers. So it's a dynamic, engaging experience because kids will get bored too. You don't want that.
Absolutely. I'm envisioning this. We had some professional development last week, and one of the admin for an elementary school in our district was talking about some stuff, and I think this is something that I'm definitely going to be talking to her about for her, it's implementing PE or movement into the classroom, and it helps with, the PE aspect or movement side of things, as well as the classroom teachers.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have PE teachers, obviously designed for classroom teachers primarily, because when I said early on is classroom teacher sees the kids way more in elementary school. In elementary school, usually the PE teacher sees them once a week. And so here, the other thing is we found there are some really creative teachers out there who teach with movement, but they usually only have about a handful of lessons. This is turnkey with hundreds of lessons. And so therefore you're not thinking, okay, how do I come up with something to engage these kids? You can literally just go into the platform and do a search of one word. Oh, I'm going to go teach this one right now.
Okay. So let's look at some advice you have for, teaching college students and high school students wanting to get in. We talked a little bit before we started recording about just different pathways for healthcare. And I think that really lends itself to what you do at the college and what you do with walkabouts and your different degrees and a little bit of teaching as well as the athletic training. So we're just kind of look at the general healthcare industry in general, I guess. As far as like a high school junior or senior, as I mentioned before, we have these pathways in Kansas. They're called career and technical education pathways. And, you can kind of dip your toe into them your sophomore year. But as you get more elective openings up throughout your high school career, your junior and senior year, you have a little bit more opportunity to put some of those in and some of those upper level classes. Um, as far as the health science pathway, what advice do you have for a high school junior or senior that doesn't know what kind of healthcare career they want, but they
Hmm.
know that they want to work in healthcare, they like helping people? What advice do you have for that student in that time frame?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I would say, and this is, I wish I would have done this earlier, is go shadow somebody that you think you might be interested in that profession, even if it's tangential to what you're doing, right? You go to your local health system and say, hey, is it possible to shadow? Maybe it's a doctor, maybe it's a nurse, maybe it's a PA, maybe it's a nurse anesthetist, or something out. Maybe you're interested in chiropractor. You go and talk with somebody there and just kind of see it versus I think I want to do this. And then, like in my case, I did that internship and I was like, this isn't for me. The earlier, I think you learn just as much about what you don't want to do as what you would want to do
Yeah.
early on. And the more experience that you can get, and the great thing now that I didn't have is the education through YouTube, right? I mean, YouTube has got so much out there of videos of different things. You're like, oh, sports medicine, what does that really mean? You can see athletic trainers doing their job. You can see physical therapists. You can see occupational therapists. I mean, there's a lot out there now that just by a little digging, you can identify and kind of get an idea of what this profession entails, that can maybe help you go in a particular direction. Because I am a big believer, though, in the liberal arts and trying to take a lot of different things. Because, I have a child in college and another one. I have three teenage daughters,
Okay.
which is fun and exhausting at the same time. But I believe in liberal education in the sense of not everyone knows what they want to do. You might have that pathway in high school, and at Furman, I can't tell you the percentage of students who come to Furman who think they're going to go to med school, and then the percentage who graduate who actually become doctors is so far off. There's high percentage want med school, and then they come in and they're like, well, maybe I don't want this. Maybe I really don't like chemistry. Maybe I really don't like physics or something like that. So the earlier you can find out and be exposed to different things gives you an idea of, yeah, I like this, or this might not be for me. So that would probably be my best advice.
Yeah, I like that. So then let's look at a college undergraduate student. They've done the shadowing in high school. They know they want to do some sort of healthcare career. Let's just pick nursing, I guess, for an
Yeah.
example, since there's such a wide variety of careers available in nursing. What advice would you have maybe for that student that's interested in wanting to become a nurse, that's in undergraduate school?
Okay. Yeah, so that's one we have here, and we talked about starting a nursing program 20 years ago, and we should have. We didn't, and a neighboring university did, and they're doing really well. I'll just tell you what I say to students who I advise who want to go into nursing is, if you know that that's what you want to do 100%, the really I look at it as there's two options. You can stay at this university and you can get all your prerequisites for that, um, and you most likely are going to have to get another bachelor's degree in nursing. So you'd graduate with your bachelor's of science or arts from Furman, and you get another one, typically, because obviously in nursing, depending on how your level you want to go, and nothing's wrong with that. We have plenty of students who have done that, and then they go get their master's or their PhD. Or you could say, hey, did you know just 30 minutes down from here is a big university, Clemson University or the University of South Carolina, that might have an entry level nursing program that you can go directly into. And maybe that would be better for you. You might save money and you might be able to get out working sooner. we have it both ways. We have students who do both. They come, they think they're going to do nursing, and they take the prerequisites and they make a shift. Or we have the kids who's like, yeah, I'm coming here, I still want to do nursing. And then they're like, I think I want to do nursing faster. So I think I'm going to, transfer to another school. So you can do it both. I getting back to the liberal, even if you're going to want to be a nurse, you can learn so much from other courses. And ultimately, what we do at Furman as a liberal arts college, we want you to learn how to critically think and learn how to write. And those are skills that are going to transfer in any discipline. So you might take you a little longer if you go to a school that doesn't have your program, but it's not like it's time wasted.
Right. Okay. And then let's look at somebody getting ready to graduate and starting to look for their first job. I know you mentioned you teach one of those upper level 300 courses.
Yeah.
And I'll let you kind of pick a degree as far as what they're going to look into. But as far as somebody getting ready to graduate and apply for their job, what are some of those key things that, as a college student, they should be focusing on to prep for that?
Yeah. So a big part of our students are going to graduate school or professional school. They've already said, I would say significant percentage. Yeah, some are going to go get a traditional quote unquote job before they do that. But I would say the vast majority of our students, at least at Furman, are saying, hey, I think I want to go get my master's in public health, or I want to go get my a degree in occupational therapy, or so on. All of those students, though, I do say, is okay, that's great. You probably have great grades already and maybe some good test scores, but can you write a cover letter? What's your resume look like? Can you have an interview and have a conversation? Because those soft skills, those people skills, are just as important. When you go and apply to even your first job, you could be the smartest person in the room when you're around somebody, but all they have is a cover letter and a resume, and it can't talk unless you make a videography of that.
Yeah.
And which I think students are probably doing that, but it can't talk. And so if you have misspellings on your resume, or your cover letter is really general, that reflects poorly on you, no matter if how good you could do the job. So make sure you recognize anything that you put your name on is a reflection of you. And is that whatever you're giving somebody, make sure that's your best effort.
I like that a lot. That cover letter and resume, and just getting those experiences. Like you said, what's on there? What do you have that's on there that represents you? Because, like you said, it's a piece of paper, and they don't know you. They've never met you. You can't tell them your story. And so, getting those experiences, I think a lot of people that I've asked that question to have said, get an entry level job while you're in school. Volunteer at a place that you think you might be at a hospital. Volunteer.
Yeah, that is always really, and I was just making an assumption that some of them have already done that, because most of the students who go on to professional school in our department, those professional schools are requiring those hours already. Like, even apply for PA school, I think you need a few hundred hours, PT and OT. So those are the things that they're doing. But once again, nobody knows that. When you write, I interned at the Prisma Health System, that's one sentence. What did you do? Those are a few bullets. Well, there might be a lot of people who have that. You got to figure out a way for you to stand out, and also know that if you do get the opportunity for an interview, well, you can't just say, well, I got a 4.0, right? Okay, that's great. Tell me how you can solve problems. Tell me how giving this slot to you is the right thing to do, because we know most graduate programs, at least in health and health sciences, are pretty competitive.
Yeah, very much so. So we're going to switch one of those questions around a little bit. As far as graduate students go, they may be getting that OT degree. What advice do you have for them while they're in grad school, getting that master's program? done. It's master's programs take a lot of time. There's a lot of studying. There's a lot of tests, 30, 40, 60 hours worth of coursework, depending on the degree you're looking at. What should that grad level student kind of be working on outside of just the classroom stuff?
Here's what and this is from experience of putting way too much pressure on myself, is it's not a race. Enjoy the experience as much as you are enjoying the coursework and thinking about going and getting a job. In hindsight, I stressed way more than I needed to going through graduate school. And not that it's not important, especially if you're paying for it, but it can be a really enjoyable experience at the same time, and knowing that, hey, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to study every day, and but I'm also going to have a little bit of fun. And because what we did learn from the pandemic is that a lot of people are suffering from depression and not being happy, and they might do really well in school. And one thing that we wasn't talked about enough, I think, during COVID, was the suicide rate among teenagers and later adolescents went way up. And a lot of that has to do with, hey, yes, you're doing school and all those great things, and you can do it independently, but you actually, to grow as a human being, you need to interact with other people, and just don't put so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah. I like that. We kind of talked a little bit about some books and recommendations you might have. What do you think for somebody that's interested in getting into healthcare, maybe a book or a video podcast that would be something good for them to check out and get into?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, Dr. Rady's book, Spark. He's a psychiatrist, so he looks at movement and cognition from a kind of different perspective, but he also talks about ADHD and anxiety and all these other things, and how physical activity is a great way to treat a lot of those types of disorders. So that is a great book. But another book that I would recommend, and it's not health related, but it's about these two kids who started a K through 12 school program, and you might be familiar with KIPP schools, KIPP. And the book is Work Hard, Be Nice. And it really teaches you a lot, you learn a lot of empathy, and you learn a lot about how people come from different backgrounds, and that only strengthens an experience. And then you also, at least in my case, you learn, that you often should be really thankful for a lot of things you take for granted. So it's Work Hard, Be Nice, or Spark.
I like those. Especially like that Work Hard, Be Nice one. I think that I'm going to go check that out.
Yeah, it's an awesome book.
Here later today. Do you have a mantra or quote that you kind of live by that kind of helps you professionally?
Yeah, one thing I tell my students all the time: you haven't learned anything till you can do something with it. Okay. So if you can't apply it to something, then you haven't learned it. And I'll give you an example in one of my fundamentals of physical rehab class. If I'm teaching you how to do manual muscle tests of the biceps and understanding the nerve that goes there and musculocutaneous, and I show you how to do it, and then the next class I say, you suspect there's a problem with this individual here, and you can tell me, well, I know the nerve and I know the muscle, but you can't show me how to do it, you haven't learned it. So I learned that from my doctoral mentor is, you haven't learned anything till you can do something. If you can't apply that, then you really haven't learned it.
Yeah, I think the application of the knowledge is key, because that's where you're going to use it in real life.
Totally.
Be able to implement it in whatever it is that you're doing in your career. I want to thank you again for spending this time with us. If someone wants to check out more about the Walkables or social
Walkabouts.
media.
Walkabouts. Yeah, no worries. You can just go to walkabouts.com.
Okay.
And you can follow us on social media there at Get Walkabouts, or you can follow me at Dr. Julian Reed. But if you just put Walkabouts in search, you'll come up. We often, if you have any, teachers listening to this or someone who wants to learn more about it, you can get a free trial and play
Okay.
around with it. But yeah, or you can also Google Furman University, and you're gonna find me there too.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for sharing your experience with us and explaining more about Walkabouts and telling us a little bit about your history.
Thanks for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
If you've made it this far into the episode, I want to thank you again for watching. Please subscribe, share, and comment below with any questions or comments you may have. If you're interested in more information about other professions within healthcare careers, please visit healthsciencecoach.com and talk to your school counselor or academic advisor. As always, stay happy, healthy, and live life with passion.